Coogs House. The Houston Cougars suffer a devastating injury, but there's a way to bounce back. Trust me.
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Cougs, daily podcast about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Jenkins. And whether you're a Houston fan or just a hater that came to stop by, thank you for making Locked On Cougs your first listen of the day. Because you're making us your first listen each and every day. If you enjoy the conversation but don't know what to say, tell us in the comments down below. If you call it soda, Coke, I guess some Midwest folks might say pop, I don't know, soft drink, whatever you call it, tell us in the comments down below. My generation, I think we all called it all sodas. Oh, they were all Coke growing up. I think that's, we're older for that now. Thank you again for making us your first listen of the day. Today's show is brought to you by Game Time. More on them later, but we got a bunch of it again today. I got some sneaky options to fill in at running back. I want to talk about the star of the show at running back. But I also, unfortunately, have to start the show with some unfortunate news. Did I say that a couple times now? About the running back position. That is that Tony Mathis Jr. was hurt. Now, on Tuesday, August 13th, Tony tweeted out, "What do you know about outworking and out-preparing everyone and still hit a detour?" That was around the same time that Joe Duarte confirmed via a tweet that Tony Mathis Jr. had, in fact, torn his ACL. And it's really, gutting news for Tony. Tony's been through a bunch of injuries in his career, both at West Virginia and Houston. He posted in June a couple of tweets that were somewhat emotional as far as tweets go about, this being his final season and kind of being the final chapter and all of that. This guy's been through a lot. He's high school class 2019. You factor in the way the COVID impacts your college career in that way, the number of injuries he's had. At West Virginia, between 2019 and 2022, he played in 31 games, had 11 starts. 10 of those starts were in 2022. He had 3 different 100-yard games. And last week, tears his ACL in a non-contract drill. I don't mean to say that it's anyone's injury. A lot of injuries were reported on Tuesday, and I think it's interesting to think about, does that mean they all happen on Tuesday? A lot of these things have happened last week or 10 days. Like, I know Tony's injury was last week, and talking to a couple people, and honestly, it's kind of like I don't know if it's necessarily like legal privacy as much as just a courtesy of privacy to say, hey, when the player's ready to talk about it, we'll go public with those kinds of things. Duarte got the information they're having surgery on Wednesday, or he got the information on Tuesday. They're having surgery on Wednesday for Tony, and so they went public with that information on Tuesday as well. Tony, by all accounts, Tony Mathis Jr. is a fantastic locker room presence, the kind of leadership guy that everyone was excited about coming to Houston, and everyone in West Virginia was upset was leaving. And it's funny, if you go back and listen, I think Coogs is the guy I had on last year to talk about previewing that game, right? And Coogs, I want to say, even said something to the effect of that they wanted to beat Houston to beat Dana. They had Sam Brown. They had a number of guys they wanted to beat Houston to beat, but really, they wouldn't have minded if Tony had a good game, right? Like, he's the kind of guy that people enjoy rooting for. I think this is a lot about his character, that even his former institution has positive things to say about him, even after leaving to come to Houston. After watching him last year and in the spring game, I had a lot of projections about who's going to be taking what snaps at running back, because there is a bunch of talent back there. I had him as kind of a between the tackles, short yardage kind of guy. And so in terms of the on-the-field replacement, that's, I think, what the challenge and question will be for the program, right? Is that he wasn't going to play every down. You're going to have a rotation of running backs this year with Parker taking the majority of them. But I kind of thought he's going to be a between the tackles kind of guy. Not because he's the biggest person. He's not a little person either. But they've got him listed at 5'11", 205 pounds, which is sturdy but not gigantic. But really, I think the real reason he's going to be between the tackles back, based on how he played last season, what he did well last season, and what he did well in the spring game, is that he's such a veteran. He understands the game so well as running back that he understands the creases, the holes, the slips inside of that tackle box really, really well. And he kind of understands, okay, if we're running a power over in this offensive setup or wherever our tight ends and H-backs are, and we're going to motion to this, and they're going to be lined up in this under front with a 3-4, whatever. He can start to put together where they're going to be. He's played enough football. He understands a lot of things about the game. It's very clear that he knows where he's supposed to be going in a very complex way. I think a lot of people just think, hey, run and find grass, and there's some instinct part of that for sure. I don't mean to downplay that, but Tony, having played so much football and been around the game for so long, was able to kind of think about things at a higher level. And that typically is a necessity at high-level football for those between the tackle kinds of backs. And I think that's honestly why he was fitting in so well at that spot. I should point out that before other injuries in his previous iteration, his first couple games there at West Virginia, he was the bounce it kind of back, the guy that, you hit A gap, then you fall out to the numbers, fall out to the hash. All right, hash number sideline is actually the order, I guess. And you kind of fall out and kind of keep going speedy up the sideline. He was that bounce it kind of guy that would then throw his shoulder into a corner on his way out of bounds, right? And it felt like he was kind of shifting his game as his body changed with each injury, right? There some of these injuries that you can get back to being 100% healthy, but you're also a little bit different kind of athlete because of it, right? Like, it's not there's anything unhealthy about you, you're just a little bit different afterwards. I will say, by all intents, and it sounds like everything about him, it just screams future coach. He could be a great coach, back heading out to the East Coast for high school stuff. You want to stay in the H and do it too. He screams future coach in the way he approaches football. And actually, kind of regardless of if he gets a waiver or whatever to come back for another season next year after tearing his ACL, if he wants to even, honestly, he could practice that now. He could start working towards that, getting the skills, working with the coaches, kind of being a de facto leader in that way, because he already had such a prominent leadership role in this team. If Houston were to find another between the tackles type of back on this roster, I think the most obvious candidate is J'Marion Burnette. He is a true freshman. It's hard, on the one hand, it's hard to play running back as a true freshman because the bruising way that impacts your body. On the other hand, it's the most translatable to what you did in high school. Quarterbacks, offensive linemen, receivers, the level of play steps up a lot between high school and college. Running back, a power is a power is a power. An ISO is an ISO is an ISO. A counter is a counter is a counter. The speed increases, the hits increase, all that. But it's probably the easiest offensive position to translate from high school to college, and then from college to the pros as well. He's 6'1", 220, is a bruiser, lists Derrick Henry as an idol. He is going to be a big-time back for Houston down the line. I didn't think it was going to have to be this fall. I was frankly kind of looking forward to it not being this fall, meaning that he'd have a long career after this. But the Alabama native ends up in Houston and may end up on the field very, very soon. For what it's worth, he was a top caliber kind of recruit, top 15 running back in the country in class of 2024, top 10 prospect in Alabama as well, 4-star prospect on multiple recruiting outlets. Big time prospect coming to Houston. So I think as far as guys that could be ready for the between the tackles role, his resume screams that he is, right. I just wish he had a little bit more time to learn from the sideline before throwing his body in there, because running backs can get worn through pretty quick, and we're gonna knock on wood and hope it doesn't happen. But that said, I do think that he's the natural between the tackles kind of back. As far as what this means for the man at running back in Parker Jenkins. I want to take a second to talk about that in a moment. But first, we're going to talk about tickets, because if you're trying to get to go see these guys in person, or the Astros, or Dash Dynamo, or concerts, or comedy shows, or if you're a theater person, if you're whatever you're trying to do, if you need tickets to go do it, you got to get those tickets at Game Time. Download Game Time app today. Use code Locked On College for $20 off your first purchase. They got all kinds of cool deals as you get closer to the event. Last minute deals, flash deals, zone deals. They have this all-in pricing toggle to make sure that you have no surprises in what things cost as you get to checkout. I like that they have the seat views. You can go click on the seat and they show what it looks like from that section and row for that type of event at that venue. So if you're far away from the stage in a concert or something like that and things are getting mixed up, they'll show you what it looks like at that venue in that type of setting. Lowest price guarantee means Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference if you can find a cheaper ticket in the same section and row somewhere else. So take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets wherever you're trying to go with Game Time. Download the Game Time app today. Create an account and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply again. Create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. All right, so I think the big question for Houston after the Tony Mathis injury is, what does this mean for the running back room? And frankly, for being blunt, someone much colder than I, someone with a lot less emotion invested in athletes than I, would be saying, well, Tony Mathis was the backup. Parker Jenkins was the starter. But I think this does impact Parker, right? First of all, Parker's got a great name. Second of all, Parker Jenkins is going to get even more of the load. Now, Parker Jenkins himself has put on some good weight. They got him listed currently at 5'11", 200, a little bit up from his freshman year last year. And I think he's kind of going to take on even bigger on-field leadership role because Tony Mathis is going to be doing his leadership things from the sideline now. And for what it's worth, the thing that I am a big fan of Parker Jenkins for is he's been pushing for this leadership thing kind of indirectly before he finished high school. So if you knew the show, knew the Houston area, knew the University of Houston, whatever, you might not remember, but Alton McCaskill, who was a stud freshman running back at Houston back in 2021, missed the 2022 season with an injury, and then the spring of 23 shocked a lot of people by transferring out of Houston, eventually settling on going to Colorado, playing for Coach Prime there. Didn't get to play a whole lot. Things kind of spiral out of that. But Alton was a local kid people loved at Houston. It surprised a lot of people and upset a lot of people when he transferred to Colorado. And frankly, kind of became a division between the folks that were leaving Houston, folks that were staying in Houston. Twitter storm, Twitter finger, da-da-da-da-da. And Parker Jenkins, again, this is April of a senior in high school, tweets out, 1 month till the new era starts. We're going to be all right. And I have to say, that was the moment I fell in love with Parker Jenkins. Right? I was like, okay, this kid sees the best running back on the roster transfer, leave the program very suddenly, surprise a lot of people. And Parker Jenkins like, we're good. I got that job. We'll be all right. Right? The confidence and the way he did it, it wasn't insulting. It was just perfect. Seized the moment, took it. It was perfect. For what it's worth, he also matched that energy on the field. He was an honorable mention for Offensive Newcomer of the Year last year. He had 8 starts, had 4.7 yards per touched. He had 3 touchdowns in his opener against Sam Houston State. That was his opener, his first start. He's the first player in school history to have 3 rushing touchdowns in his first start. He can also catch the football, had 15 catches on 15 targets. That means no drops in his freshman season. He also had 8 returns for 140 yards. He was a very impressive freshman running back, right? I talked ad nauseum on the show last year about how he clearly has a different gear between getting the handoff and hitting the line of scrimmage than most backs, right? He has that innate twitch where he can put his toes in the ground and get to the heels of the offensive line quicker with a burst, and the defense has to react. They're playing reactionary defense after that. They can't be aggressive, like as aggressive, right? He's really, really good. Last year, there were moments where the Houston offensive line looked overpowered, outmatched, and so that obviously hurts running backs' numbers some. I don't mean to say he had 2,000 yards in a season or anything like that, but I do think that on the inverse of that, he was able to use his own determination, B, that fast switch, and C, his own vision to kind of cover up some of the holes in that offensive line as well. Right, offensive line is year 2 under Manyagavi, a whole bunch of new faces on that offensive line. So we'll see how things go with them. I got faith in a couple of those guys, though. I know that their names you might not recognize, but I think they're going to be better than projected. And I think the center is really good. And I think it's going to be evident that Demetrius Hunter is really good at center when he's blocking for Parker Jenkins. With the Tony Mathis injury, Parker now has a bigger role, and those second and shorts, maybe even the 3rd and 4, 3rd and 3, where it's kind of a 3rd and 4 is not a tweener down anymore. 3rd and 3 kind of is. You might have Parker out there because he has a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of everything, right? Whereas before, Tony could have been out there on that 3rd and 3 kind of situation. I think Parker's now going to have to take those loads as well. I also think that this probably means for sure that Stacy Sneed will be a 3rd down option most of the time because, frankly, if it's 3rd and 4 or more, Parker Jenkins will probably play 1st and 2nd down of every 3 downs, right? There will be no more swapping with Tony Mathis, and so that means that PJ is going to play more often, and that means that those 3rd downs, especially the pass situations, even though Parker Jenkins has good hands, will probably go more to Stacy Sneed. I like Stacy Sneed as a receiving running back a lot. And there's been times where that speed he displays as a receiving running back comes into play in the run game. I'm not saying he can't run the football, but he is more of an off-the-edge kind of guy. And so I think you'll see him a lot on 3rd down. That will be more now, though, with Parker taking the handoffs on 1st and 2nd down, right? And we know that with Kevin Barbay, this is going to be a more run-centric offense than it has been in the past. And this rotation of guys is going to be important. Burnette getting some of that inside carry kind of stuff. Sneed getting some of the tosses, the sweeps, the swing passes, right? Mesh rail kind of stuff, right, as well. They lined up a slot one time last year for Weeze Pask at St. Houston State. I was like, that is the speed I'm seeing here. Anyway, I digress. He's really fast with the ball in his hands, get it out in space. That space didn't happen behind the tackles, but that all being said, Parker Jenkins being 1st and 2nd down back and now occasional 3rd down back means that Stacy is going to get rotated in more because, again, you can only put so much on your running back, even though he's a sophomore. Last year, it felt like Dana and company didn't want to put too much on a freshman running back. There's no more of that worry with Parker as a sophomore. They just can't be. There's not the space for it. It's not the time for it. It's got to be his show. And I think it will be, for what it's worth. I think it's going to be a pretty fun show, to say the least. He's a great, dynamic runner of the football. That's not all they've got at running back. They got a couple sneaky options back there, too. And I want to talk about them in a second as well. So, Houston loses Tony Mathis. Again, gutting. He's apparently a great person. It sucks to see bad things happen to good people. That's the way it goes. I think he's going to be a fantastic football mind and leader to have in the locker room and on the team. I think he's going to make a big impact in all of that. But we're looking at who's going to be on the field this fall. I mentioned that J'Marion Burnette may take over a lot of the short yardage, big back kind of stuff. I mentioned that Parker Jenkins probably plays a lot more than we even anticipated. I mentioned that Stacy Sneed is going to come in and play some third down passing stuff because of how much more Parker's playing on first and second down. But there were other names on the depth chart in this backfield that I continue to be intrigued by. From the spring game, a kid named Sherman Smith, who's 5'7", $185, out of Katy Tompkins High School. He had a great spring game. If you go back and watch that tape, he was number 36. Again, I don't think people had him high on their radar. He's Donovan's cousin. He's got a bunch of stuff going on in the family, connects him back to the University of Houston, but he hasn't been on the field a whole lot. 5'7", $185, not the biggest guy. There was just something about him in the spring game where he had, no pun intended, a little bit more spring to his step in a lot of ways. Now, I understand he was typically playing with other backups on backup units versus backup units, and so that may not have been the biggest test of anything. But on the whole, I do think that he looked really, really good at different points of that spring game. You continue to see him in different clips. You're paying attention to what the media team's putting out about practices this fall. He could be a diamond in the rough kind of guy by the time it pops up. His buddy and being shorter folks in the backfield that I think most people think may get some of the load this year is Rashawn Sanford. Rashawn's a redshirt freshman. He got hurt in camp last year. He's from Harker Heights, though, right? 5'9", $185. He looks stronger than that to me, if I'm being really honest. He looks like he put on some good weight in the offseason, or maybe just had sleeves rolled up super high. A strong-looking kid. He was everything at Harker Heights. I mean, a true stud at the high school level in Texas high school football. Was a good recruit, but was dinged as a recruit because of his size. And, for what it's worth, recruit rankings can put a lot on measurables because you're trying to translate kids to the next level. And that can be hard when you're looking at like a kid that's 5'9", right? Because there's only so many measurables for them to like exceed and excel with. Nevertheless, he was a 3-star prospect across multiple recruit sites. And I think had he been 5'11", 6 foot tall, he probably has at least that other star, if not more. He was really, really talented, is what I'm trying to say, in high school. When he played in the spring game, when you watch his high school tape, he's got great feet. He really sets up his blocks well, gets in and a cuts well. And what I thought was interesting is that, when you're thinking about positions in football, I think one of the beautiful things about football is it's a game that like people of all different body sizes and all different shapes can play. You just have to be strong and tough, right? That's kind of the only two. If you're 6'5", you might be a tackle. If you're 6 foot, you might be a slot. If you're 5'8", 5'9", you might be a running back, right? And the reason that those running backs can be shorter is that can actually weirdly be advantageous if you're using your scheme correctly, right? We know Barbe likes to pull guards. We know that Emmanuel Gabi likes to pull guards as well. When you're pulling linemen and you have a shorter, smaller running back, in those inside kind of trap pulls, the powers, different interior trap kind of plays for X's and O's kind of folks who are going to like kick out with an inside guard, but then kick out a D tackle or kick out an end or whatever. What can end up happening is that your smaller running back actually kind of, for lack of a better phrase, hides behind the guard in a way that all of a sudden that guard sets up to make a block and he blocks the defensive lineman, and the linebacker behind the lineman doesn't know what side of the block the running back is going to pop out of because they can't see him, right? You saw with Tajay Spears and Willie Fritz at Tulane, but you've also seen like Darren Sproles, Maurice Jones-Drew, Jaquiz Rogers. Like running backs can be shorter, and this can be an advantage to them. So whether it's Rashawn Sanford or Sherman Smith, I do think there's a chance you see one of these shorter guys also get some running. And this is going to be a run-heavy offense. The running backs are going to get a lot of totes. And the truth is that Parker is going to get a lot of shine. I think it's going to be kind of his show in a lot of ways because he's earned it. He's also that good. He does a lot of different things very, very well. But you're going to see these guys, Stacy Sneed on third down passes, J'Marion Burnette up the middle on 4th and 1, Rashawn Sanford or Sherman Smith, one of these shorter guys may get in as well to kind of follow those pulling guards on stuff. And all those different things are moving pieces and parts for Barbay and the offense here to figure out and put together. I am upset that Tony Mathis got hurt. I think he fit in this equation very well. He did a couple of different things, some of the between the tackle stuff, but also could follow the guards. And I think he did a lot of things really well. And I'm upset he got hurt for him. He's been working towards this point for a long time. Who knows if he'll, if he wants to come back next season, how the injury register would go through and so on. But I will say, in looking at this roster, with as much running back talent as there is on it, having Tony's voice and leadership, even if you can't get him on the field, is going to be very important. A lot of good, talented kids in this backfield. Parker, J'Marion, Rashawn, Sherman, Stacy. But I mentioned a lot of underclassmen and folks that haven't played a whole lot of snaps, right? And that's where having Tony, even if he cannot play in your locker room, is going to be really, really important. Now, if you think I'm overselling, underselling, way off, way on, whatever, tell me in the comments down below. Would love to hear your thoughts. We're also making sure we hit subscribe these days. We subscribe, like, and comments, and hit the bell so you know when we go live. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day. If you're looking for a second listen, Locked On Big 12 is doing all kinds of things, get you ready for the football season across the entire Big 12 conference. Go make sure you check out Drake and what they got going on over there at Locked On Big 12 for a second listen. Locked On Coogs is a proud member of the Locked On Podcast Network. That means your team every day. Go Cougs.